I was able to stack up 49,640 points for Damage Wasps during the Locked Gate event on Blue Gate. For your equipment, you're going to want to bring 2 rows or 8 total stacks of Snitch Scanners. To go with those, you're also going to want to bring 4 wolf packs. 1 wolf pack will cover 2 stacks of scanners as long as they all call in once you've thrown them. For your weapons, I recommend the Hole Cracker, the Osprey, and the Jupiter for this specific strategy, and then the Venator I use just to protect myself in case there was PvP. With how expensive the bag was, I didn't want to try and defend it with an Osprey and a Jupiter. So I brought the Venator, but I didn't actually end up using it at all during this. For my bag, I went with the Looting MK3 Cautious, which just gives me extra bag space and gave me more room to play with in terms of what I was bringing into the game. Once you spawn in, you want to find the nearest open area that you can kind of be a little bit protected with. The first thing you want to try and do is offload some of your Snitch Scanners and a wolf pack to cover those. You want to space out how often you're using your Snitch Scanners, and you don't want to use them all at the location where you're going to be set up for the rest of the match. I attempted this once yesterday and I did all of the Snitch Scanners in the same place, and the amount of smoke that was created was an absolutely obnoxious thing to deal with. Not only did it obscure my own vision, but it made it very hard for the enemies to know where I was, and I had moments where the Wasps and the Hornets couldn't find me, or even I had a Snitch that was just scanning the area over and over and over and never actually called in reinforcements because it just couldn't see me. So you don't want to throw your Snitch Scanners where you're actually going to end up. Throw them somewhere else so that all that smoke is applied outside of where your normal rotation is going to be. Additionally, for the Snitch Scanners, you want to try and wait about a minute between uses, if not a little bit more. The longer you wait between your uses of the stacks, the more success I have found in them calling in repeatedly. If you try and just throw your next 2 stacks after eliminating the ones that you just called in most cases, the ones that you're throwing are just going to start failing as you throw them. I can't really explain why this is or what this is, or even if Embark has ever told the community what's happening here. But as far as I can tell, the longer you wait between throwing them, when you're throwing them in volume, the better your chances are of them all activating and calling in Wasps. In a perfect world, you can throw 6 Snitch Scanners and then wait for them all to land, and then 1 wolf pack will take out all 12 because a wolf pack will split into 12 projectiles, making it very easy to just eliminate them all. But make sure you have your Hole Cracker ready just in case there's a straggling Wasp or 2, and you can take it out real quick that way. I'm going to jump mostly a little bit later into this game once I got into a better flow. Up front, I was running into a couple of issues that I was trying to figure out and made some mistakes that I will help you avoid making in your run. My plan originally was to use the Osprey to damage the Snitch enough that I could finish it off right as it called in for reinforcements. What I found is more often than not, it was hard to tell when the Snitch was on its last shot. Sometimes the Snitch would be on fire when it was at its last shot, and sometimes it would just be eliminated when it was still smoking. So it was very hard to gauge with the Osprey specifically when it was on the last shot, and once it starts to fly away, it becomes considerably harder to hit. So I actually ended up eliminating some Snitches too soon and then not eliminating them fast enough when they flew away earlier in the game, and I lost a good deal of points. I ended up going to the Jupiter. The Jupiter was a lot more consistent, but even with the Jupiter, sometimes I would hit it dead on and it would still start to fly away. So there's some inconsistency in the damage that gets applied to the Snitch, so just be aware of that. But I personally found a lot more value in using the Jupiter. It was way more consistent than the Osprey was for me. Once you are at the Overlook Airshaft, the process overall is incredibly simple. What you want to do is you want to use the Osprey to aggro Snitches to you, and you can find Snitches anywhere on the map, but primarily they'll be to the north, to the east, and to the south. The north Snitch will spawn close to the Overlook extraction and then also up near Pilgrim's Peak, where the Rocketeers are patrolling. So make sure that you're careful when you are aggroing that Snitch not to also grab the Rocketeers with it. The Snitch to the east will spawn very close to the Overlook Airshaft. It'll be right by it, and you'll see it come in with a single smoke plume. And then also to the south, one will spawn a little bit closer to the Ancient Fort, and one will spawn closer to the actual checkpoint. So just keep an eye out for those. Snitches will always come in with a single smoke plume, so you can know pretty quickly where Snitch is and when it's coming in. Now, depending on which weapon you decide to go with, you either want to damage the Snitch and aggro it to you, or you just want to shoot near it to aggro it to you so you can apply damage once it gets there. I have personally found that if you happen to clip a wing on the snitch when it's still pretty far away, it can take a lot longer for it to get to you. So just try and be careful not to clip a wing when you're going for those. Now the trick here, the key thing that you really need to aim to try and do, which will maximize your score for this challenge, is the snitch will do a 3 alarm chime, and then on the 4th alarm chime that it makes, that's when it starts to fly away. So the good news is that it's very consistent between snitches. It's always the same, which really helps in terms of like getting the timing down for you. The trick is that the millisecond that it starts to call in its reinforcements, it also begins to fly away. Becomes much more difficult to actually hit and eliminate. So you really need to be precise with your timing, and if you do it right, the idea is to eliminate the snitch as it calls in its initial wave of reinforcements, which will be 2 wasps and a hornet. Use the hole cracker to eliminate those, and then go grab the snitch's scanner from the eliminated snitch, and then save it until a little bit later in the game. But then in this way, the snitch scanner will also call in 2 wasps, so you end up getting 4 wasps per snitch, and each wasp is 440 points, so that it ends up getting you to about 1760 off a single snitch, which is a lot of points to rack up off a single snitch. So if you're able to do the precision of eliminating the snitch as it calls in reinforcements and then grabbing that scanner and saving it for later, you can really stack up a ton of points quickly. Now beyond that, there really isn't a ton more to this challenge. You've done the heavy lifting of already using all of your snitch scanners in the beginning, all of your wolf packs have been thrown, and now you're just working through the map-based spawns. I recommend about 8 to 10 minutes, somewhere in there. If you have, 6 to 10 scanners in your inventory, start throwing those. I recommend 2 at a time for no other reason than it was just really easy for me to manage it that way. Once it got down to about 3 minutes for me, I took the remaining scanners that I had down to the actual extraction where I needed to go, but I didn't actually press the button right away. And this is something that you can do for yourself. Keep in mind that the extraction, the air shaft, will always be the exact same time from when you press that button. So I'm not 100% sure on exactly how long it takes for the air shaft to show up, but just for this example, let's assume that it's a 60 seconds from the second you hit the button. If there is a minute remaining in the game and you press the button at 1 minute remaining, that means at 0 seconds, the air shaft is going to open and you will have 25 seconds to get into the air shaft before the doors auto close. Versus if you were to press the button at 1 second remaining, you now get a full minute before the air shaft opens and the additional 25 seconds on top of that to finish up some last elims on the map, and you kind of get a little bit of an extra bit of time on the map this way. So I ended up just staying right by the button and calling in wasps from the snitch scanners up until about 20 seconds, and then I pressed the button just to make sure that I didn't miss on that, and got my last elims before I got into the elevator. So just keep that in mind. You can kind of extend your time on the map by playing it that way, but it is obviously a risk. Once you've stacked up enough eliminations, or you're just totally out of time on the map, head back to Speranza, collect any loot if you haven't already, and watch your score fly up the leaderboard. That's going to be it for me today, y'all. Thanks for watching.